Let's talk about an example of a huge retail establishment like JCPenney, which is in trouble today, which has thousands of different inventory items. Same thing for a Giant Eagle grocery store, or again Kmart or Walmart. Literally tens of thousands of SKUs or stock keeping units. It doesn't make sense for a manager to exercise the same level of control, same level of management on every item that they have on inventory. There are some items which can be classified as vital few or A-class items, and C-class items which we call as the trivial many. So you have A-class, B is in the middle, C is in the bottom. Where did this whole thing come up? Initially, this idea of classification goes back to Wilfred Pareto, who was a late 19th century, early 20th century economist in Italy. Pareto Analysis, which you have heard of, some of you might have heard of the 80-20 rule. It originated from Wilfred Pareto, who did an analysis in Italy and then empirically showed that 80% of the land is owned by the 20% of the aristocracy, the rich people. Of course, Benito Mussolini became a big fan of Pareto. So that is the negative part of that story of Wilfred Pareto. However, what he really empirically demonstrated became the foundation for economics, many aspects of economics, how to tax people, and so on. But his concept of 80% of the wealth concentrated among 20% of the people. Today it can be worse than that. The wealth may be concentrated in a much smaller percentage of the society. This concept has been used in quality control, inventory control, sales management, many other places. The Pareto Effect, the 80-20 rule. What is that in ABC analysis? Like I explained, you may have 80% of your money, your inventory dollars, locked up in just 20% of these items. So logically, what is the conclusion? I'm better off controlling strictly, closely, these 20% of these items. Out of the thousands of items that I need to control, I put more emphasis on this 20% and very little emphasis on the others. Why? By putting emphasis on 20% of the items, I have control over 80% of my money, my dollar. Simple enough? That is the concept of ABC analysis. So what do? We classify or divide the items, the tens of thousands of items, on annual usage value. What is annual usage value? Annual usage value is nothing but a product of the value of the item. Here, I'm not talking about price, selling price. I'm talking about the cost price. How much does it cost to the retailer to get this item? Not the selling price of the item. The cost price multiplied by the usage. That is the volume of sales of this particular product. So if you look at this simple table there, A-class items account for the top 80% of the dollar usage value. I will re-emphasize here, A-class items need not be the most expensive items. They need not be the highest selling items. It is the product of the two. So if there is a $100 item which you are selling one per month versus you have a $20 item, you are selling 10 of them a month. You can do the simple math. The first one is $100 times 1, which is a total dollar usage value of 100. Whereas the $20 item multiplied by 10 units that you're selling, it is $200. So the second one becomes more important than the first one, although the $20 item is 1/5 of the cost of the $100 item. So you can do this in a simple Excel like I'm going to show you in the next couple of slides. So the top 80% of the dollar usage value is A-class items. And the bottom 5% is the C-class items. And in the middle, you have 15%. And if you look at the second row there, the percentage of items that account for 80% of the dollar usage value can be 20%. And the 15% in the middle be the 30% of the items. And the bottom 5% of the usage value can be over 50%, a big portion of your inventory items. But keep in mind, when you do the analysis in your business, it may not be as obvious as you see in this theoretical percentages. So it need not be that exactly the top 20% of the items account for 80% of the usage value. The idea is to find out that vital few, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, whatever the case is, which account for 70, 60, 80% of your usage value. That set of A-class items is what you want to focus a lot on. And look at that, lot size. You want to have low lot size, low safety stock on A-class items, whereas on the C-class items, you don't care. You can have high lot size, high safety stock, because they're trivial. They account for only 5% of your dollar usage value. Same thing, the control. You will have very tight control on A-class items, moderate control on B, and loose control on C items. Again, loose in quotes. Not that you don't care about them as much, not that you don't care about them, but not as much as the A-class items. Same thing with cycle counts. If you're not familiar with the concept of cycle counts, this is what they do in retail and manufacturing every 6 months, every year. That is exactly counting how much is an inventory and then trying to reconcile that with the accounting books or the computer system. If it says that I need to have 45 pairs of this particular kind of shoes, then I actually go and check my stocks and see, do I have 45 or 44 or 46 or 50 or 40? That is cycle counting. And it is a laborious, time-consuming process, non-productive. So if for A-class items, you do a tight control of cycle counting, you do that more often. Whereas for C-class items, which account for only 5% of your dollar usage, you don't care as much. You may do cycle counting once a year or not even bother about that. Whereas A-class items, you have tighter control. If you look at the next couple of slides, then you will see that there is going to be a simple example that I'm going through there, which looks at the calculation that goes into determining A, B, and C. As I said, these two slides, this and the next one, is a snapshot from an Excel spreadsheet, which is already solved using ABC analysis. And this example has only 10 items. And realistically, you don't need ABC analysis when you have 10 items. You better control all the 10 items as tightly as possible. As I said earlier, ABC analysis is applicable and useful only when you have thousands, a large number of items or SKUs that you need to manage. But for demonstration and illustration purposes, we can look at a simple problem of 10 items. So you can see the annual volume in units, and you can also see the unit cost. So all we have done here is multiplied the annual volume by unit cost, and that will give you the annual dollar volume. So as you can see here, what we have done is then put them in the decreasing order of the annual dollar volume. And you will see the very first item accounts for 38% of the entire dollar usage value of the items. You will see that the total amount of money, the total annual dollar volume is about 232,000. So what we have done in the column which says percentage of annual dollar volume is basically taken the annual dollar volume and converted that into a percentage of the total, which is $232,000 and so on. And if you add all the annual percentage dollar volume, it goes to 100%. Now look at these C-class items. 50% of all the items, that is 5 out of 10, which is 50%, account for only about 5% of the entire annual dollar usage value. Again, like I said, it doesn't have to be like that in reality. It may not be as smooth and nice as 5% of the dollar volume is locked up in 50% of the items, but it will be somewhere close to that in majority of the companies. So that is how ABC analysis is done. All you have to do here is you will be given 2 columns, or you will have the data for 2 columns, the annual volume and the unit cost. Multiply, get the product of this, which is your annual dollar volume, and then put that in decreasing order, and then separate them logically as A, B, and C.